Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, anyways, man, this is a very, very good fight card. So, I thought that I would do my fight predictions on here. This is going to be the UFC 266 fight prediction. I'm going to do all five of the main events because I kind of know all these fighters decently well. So, we're going to talk about it. Let's get into it. And of course, we're going to start off with the first fight on the main card and then going all the way up to the main event. So hopefully, of course, the goal always in these predictions is to get all five correct. But you know that it's very very hard to do that when it comes down to, because in fighting, really in sports in general, you just never truly know what's going to happen. By the way, I also made my football picks for week 3 as well. Go ahead and check that out if you all want to. Anyways, man. So let's go on to the first fight: Jessica Andraj versus Cynthia Calvillo. I think that this is a very, very good fight. Jessica Andrade, in her last fight, I believe she ended up losing to Valentino Shevchenko. She ended up moving up in weight. Andrade is a very strong fighter. Overall, she is very powerful. She doesn't have bad wrestling either. If she gets a hold of you, she can really slam you down to the ground. So that's something to take very, very seriously. Cynthia Cavillo, she ended up losing her last fight, I believe, to Caitlin Chukagian, which I was a little bit surprised. I don't remember the fight in full. I would have to rewatch it, but I rewatched a little bit of it this morning, like the first round, and it was somewhat competitive, but I was actually a little bit surprised. I think the last time that I watched it that they gave that one to Chukagian. I've never really been impressed with Caitlin Chukagian. I think that she's really not that great of a fighter. I think Cynthia Calvillo, in my opinion, actually is more talented than her. I think Cynthia has more smoothness overall to her style. I think she has more rhythm. I think overall that she can be a very decent striker. Listen, bottom line is this, man. Both of these girls are very, very talented fighters. I was actually going to pick Cynthia Calvillo, but knowing Jessica Andrade, how dangerous she can be with that power, and also if she gets a hold of Cynthia, and Cynthia does sometimes have a problem with people on the ground. She had a little bit of a problem with that against Caitlin Chukagian, and she also lost to Carla Esparza, who's a decent wrestler as well. That's probably the main reason why I'm going to pick Jessica Andrade here. I need to see how Cynthia Calvillo is going to react to this. I'm actually going to be rooting for Cynthia Calvillo because I think she's a very talented fighter. And I think that, under the radar, she may be able to climb up to that ranking one day and say, hey, maybe I can challenge Valentina Shevchenko. Although there's not a lot of girls that can challenge Valentina Shevchenko because she's just very, very talented. But I'm going to go with Jessica Andrade on this one. This is a 3-round fight, so if Cynthia Calvillo, if she ended up pulling off the upset here, would not be surprised at all. But I got to go with my girl Jessica Andrade here. I think that she's just a little bit too powerful. I think overall that, she can take a hell of a shot. And on top of that, if she catches Cynthia Calvillo up against a cage, if she's able to slam her, if she's able to get her overall up in the clinch, there's a very decent chance that she might be able to take her down and dominate this fight. But we'll have to see what happens here. So I'm going to go with Jessica Andrade. I'm going to say that more than likely it's going to be unanimous decision or split decision, but we'll see overall what happens. Should be very, very interesting. We'll see. I'm going with Jessica Andrade on this one. That's my first pick. We'll see if I'm right. We'll see if I'm wrong. She certainly is the favorite here. We'll see what happens. Okay, so this next fight, Curtis Blades versus Jairzinho, I believe is his name, Rosenstreich, when it comes down to it. I certainly know his last name. So Rosenstreich overall, I believe he is from South America, actually, when it comes down to it. Very talented fighter. What Rosenstreich really reminds me of, he's kind of a more, I'm trying to think, like a more articulated striker version of Derek Lewis. That's that's kind of what he reminds me of. Some people overall may disagree with that. I have not excuse me. I have not necessarily seen how good his ground game is. He purely is a striker. He's someone overall that is going to try and get the knockout when it comes down to it. Curtis Blades is a guy to where his striking isn't bad, but it's mainly his wrestling that you have to worry about here. Curtis Blades is going to be the favorite heading into this fight. He's won some decently big matchups in the last couple of fights, but he did kind of disappoint me in that last fight against Derek Lewis, where I thought maybe he could have done a little bit more. And of course, he ran into that right uppercut, I believe it was, and he ended up getting knocked out, which of course, wasn't good for him. So this really is a fight that can go either way. If Curtis Blades, if some of the limitations that he has in his striking, if it still shows, he certainly can lose this fight. I don't know how good of a wrestler or how good on the ground Rosenstreich is. So I'm not necessarily sure. I haven't really seen anyone really try to take him to the ground, so we'll see what happens here. I'm going to say that I'm going to favor Curtis Blades in this one. I think Curtis Blades, because of his wrestling, I think overall that he will have an advantage. We'll see overall what happens. But I got to go with Curtis Blades on this one. I'm going to go by, you know what? I'm going to be a little bit risky here. I'm going to say second round stoppage. I'm going to say second round stoppage. That's a little bit risky. Would not be surprised if it went the other way, but Curtis Blades, because he has that very good wrestling, I'm going to go with him on this one. Of course, that's also the same reason why I went with him against Derek Lewis, but he kind of ran into the wrong shot against Derek Lewis. Hopefully he learns from his mistakes. We'll see what happens. Okay, excuse me. So this next fight, this is a rematch that is happening. The last time these two guys fought each other was so many years ago, like literally over 10 years ago. I don't remember how long ago the first fight was, but I do remember watching it. Of course, Nick Diaz, he ended up knocking out Robbie Lawler, for those of you that don't know. This is a very interesting fight. Nick Diaz has not really fought in the cage for many, many years. He's not fought in a professional fight, I believe, for many, many years. We'll see where his conditioning is. Excuse me. I have to guess that his conditioning more than likely probably is in a very good place because the Diaz brothers, they do certain things to keep their conditioning up. The problem with both Diaz brothers is that they just don't tend to throw enough in certain fights for me. Like they'll brag about how much endurance they have and all sort of stuff, but sometimes they'll kind of just stare at you, or they throw, but they throw very sloppy. Many people like to say that the Diaz brothers, that their boxing is very, very good for the UFC, but in all reality, it's really not that good. When you talk about good boxers for the UFC, Conor McGregor once upon a time was a very decent boxer for the UFC. Dustin Poirier is an excellent boxer for the UFC. And there's a couple of others that I may be forgetting. Kelvin Gastelum actually is not the worst boxer in the UFC. And there's a few others. Israel Adesanya, he's not necessarily too bad either. There's a couple of others that I may be forgetting. But those guys, those guys actually know how to, you can tell that they've worked on their boxing a little bit in the UFC. But when it comes down to the overall, man, I don't know. Robbie Lawler, he's pretty much damaged goods. Nick Diaz, he's a guy overall that hasn't fought in a really, 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 really long time. And I just, this is a 3-round fight. I don't really know what's going to happen here. I was going to pick Nick Diaz at first, but because of the long layoff, and I understand that Robbie, he's not necessarily at a good point in his career, but I don't know if Nick Diaz is either. I'm having a real tough time deciding this one. This is going to be a very, very interesting fight. You know what? I'm going to pick this guy, and this is going to be a little bit of a risky pick. I'm actually going to pick Robbie Lawler. I'm going to pick Robbie Lawler to win by decision. Nick Diaz, of course, is very, very hard to stop, so I'll be surprised if there's a stoppage. But you know what? I think he's going to surprise him a little bit. I think Robbie's going to surprise him a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised if Nick Diaz came back, but Robbie still has that decent power. Robbie, even though he's not really at a good point in his career, I don't really know where Nick is either. And like I said, the Diaz brothers, they have a tendency to really like to stare at you in the middle of fights. They claim they have all this stamina and, that they like hitters and all sort of bullshit when it comes down to it, but when they fight in the cage, a lot of the times they won't throw nearly as much as they should sometimes, especially against one of their more elite opponents. And both of these guys are really not at the best point in their career from what I've seen. Robbie Lawler, he's pretty much done at this point in time in his career, but he might surprise Nick. I'm going to go with Robbie Lawler in this fight. Very interesting fight, but I'm going to go with Robbie Lawler. I'm going to say by decision. I'm going to say by unanimous decision. Let's see what happens. I think that he's at least going to win 2 rounds in this fight, but we'll see what happens. Should be very, very interesting. Okay. So, the co-main event, Valentino Chev Chango versus Lauren Murphy. Well, I think most of us are predicting Valentina Shevchenko to win this fight. As you see there, she's a negative 1250 favorite. That's a very, very, very big favorite when it comes down to it. And I have to agree. Valentina Shevchenko, I just think she's just too talented for that division. The 125-pound division, it's just really not that talented. And a certain amount of people may disagree, but none of these girls besides Valentina Shevchenko, none of them are super duper talented. I guess Jessica Andraj, she can fight decent, but even she has a lot of holes in her game. Holes in her game, excuse me. You have Jessica I there, but she's not really that great. And this girl Lauren Murphy, she's really tough. She sticks in there, but I just think she has a little bit too many faults. I think she's too hittable. I don't think her ground game is going to compete very well with Valentina Shevchenko. If she was somehow able to beat Valentina Shevchenko, that might actually be the biggest upset that has ever happened in UFC history. And a certain amount of people may disagree, but the odds on this one are so clearly in favor of Valentina Shevchenko. This is a 5-round fight. I don't see how Valentina Shevchenko really loses to anyone inside that division. I just don't see anyone that is talented enough to beat her there. There's only one woman in the world that I would really bet to actually beat Valentina in the first place, and that would be Amanda Nunes. And the rematch between them was very, very tight and close, so you can really debate who you thought won that one. Excuse me. But I got to go with my girl Valentina Shevchenko on this one, man. She's a beast. I think overall that she's way too good for any of those girls in that division. Lauren, she's not too bad, but, she's not really that great either. She's just not someone that I see holding a belt, while Valentina overall is, still pretty much the dominant fighter in that division, so it is what it is. And then that leads us to our last fight. So I got Valentina Shevchenko. What is the result? I think it's going to be stoppage. I think it's going to be stoppage within either the first 3 rounds. I think overall that it's going to be either a TKO or a submission. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go by submission. I think it's going to be submission. That's my prediction. Let's stick with that. All right. And that brings us to our number one fight of the night. Not only the main event, but also, in my opinion, the best fight of the night. Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. This is a very great fight, guys. I really, 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 really love this fight. I think that Ortega can bring some challenges to the table that Volkanovski maybe has not dealt with completely in a fighter. And Volkanovski is going to bring some challenges as well. This fight is so interesting. This is going to be a 5-round fight. Ortega, I really need to see what he looks like now ever since he lost to Max Holloway. Of course, you're going to have the Max Holloway supporters, overall, they still say, oh, he's the champion and all this other stuff. In my opinion, Volkanovski very clearly beat Max Holloway in the first match. Like, I thought it was 5-0. And in the rematch, I thought Volkanovski just pulled it out. Now, in the rematch, if you thought Max Holloway won, I don't have a problem with that, but it was very, very tight. Whoever you gave the third round to was whoever won the fight, because Max Holloway very clearly won the first 2. Volkanovski very clearly won the last 2. Whoever you gave the third round to, it was a toss-up for me. And I gave Volkanovski that third round. Certain people may disagree. I would understand why you gave it to Max Holloway, but, it is what it is. Anyways, when it comes down to it, man, Brian Ortega, the last time that we seen him in the ring, that was against the Korean zombie, Chen Sung-jung, I believe is his name. Very good performance by Brian Ortega. I thought that actually at the time was a 50-50 fight. But Chen Sung-jung, he's very limited at times with the striking, and sometimes he does not really have great head movement. And Brian Ortega was pretty much able to outstrike him the whole entire night. His striking, he certainly worked on it, but I need to really see how he does against an elite striker. I need to see how he does against Volkanovski, Max Holloway in a rematch. I need to see how he does against, that one Abraham Lincoln looking dude. I can't remember his name, Magomedov or whatever the hell his name is, but when it comes down to it, I need to see him compete against those guys to really see where his striking is. Brian Ortega looked very one-dimensional with his striking in the Max Holloway fight. I do think overall that he has improved as a fighter, so that's what really makes this fight very interesting. Both of them really have very, very good power. If you're asking me overall who I think has the clear advantage in the striking, I think it's got to be Alexander Volkanovski. I think Alexander Volkanovski very clearly is the more articulate, the better striker. He seems like a natural-born striker to me. Who has the advantage on the ground? I think that's going to be Brian Ortega. It's an interesting fight. It's an interesting fight. I could easily see this fight going either way. If Brian Ortega won this fight by submission or somehow even by knockout, I wouldn't be surprised. If Alexander Volkanovski, if he actually ended up winning this fight, I would not be surprised. Man, who do I think is going to win this fight? I almost want to say Brian Ortega. I don't know. I just have a gut feeling here that Brian Ortega, for whatever reason, is going to take it. I just have a feeling with, that fight. I had the same feeling with the Lopez Lomachenko fight, and also the Gervonta Tank Davis Jose Pedraza fight. It almost has that vibe to me. We'll see. You know what? I'm gonna go with the logical pick on this one. I'm going to say Alexander Volkanovski because that's what my brain is telling me. My gut is telling me Brian Ortega, and we'll see what happens. This is a very great fight. Volkanovski, his wrestling maybe did need a little bit of work in the past. The last time I seen him against a very good ground guy was Chad Mendez, and he was having a rough time in that fight. So we'll see what happens. Brian Ortega, if he's able to take him down, he might be able to do something. However, Volkanovski, I think he realizes the threat of Brian Ortega overall, and when it comes down to the overall, I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting. We'll see what happens. I'm going to pick Alexander Volkanovski by unanimous decision. But if Brian Ortega won this fight, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It really is that close, guys. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. So my picks are Alexander Volkanovski, Valentino Shevchenko, Robbie Lawler, Curtis Blades, and Jessica Andraj. Let me know overall who your picks are and why. And I'm going to go for now, but thank you all so much for watching. We'll see what happens. We're going to see if Brian Ortega really has improved, has improved on his striking that much to see if he can compete with the elite strikers. And we're also going to see if Brian Ortega's wrestling, if that has given Volkanovski some trouble. So we'll see what happens. This is a very interesting fight. We'll see what happens. I'll talk to y'all later. I gotta go.